The rain had ceased before dawn broke over Winterfell's battlements, leaving every stone and turret named you land and melting ice and silvery droplets. A faint mist curled through the courtyard, swirling around the broken weapons and discarded cloaks of soldiers who had never fully slept. Brienne of Tarth stood at the edge of the hilltop wall, her great sword resting against the cold granite, and watched as the first gray light spilled over the wolfswood. Mist hugged the ancient weirwood trees, their limbs knotted like arthritic hands reaching for mercy, and below, the godswood lay hidden, its heart dark against the waking sky. She should not have been here. Every bone in her frame, every memory of oaths sworn and deeds performed, warred against the impossible promise to stand at the side of Sansa Stark, the newly crowned queen in the north, as her personal guard. Yet there she was, armor buffed until it gleamed like fresh fallen snow, her mail coif fitted snug beneath her helm, her scarred gauntlets laced with the braided steel of her sworn vows. The hush around her pressed like a living thing. Perhaps it was that silence she coveted most. The stillness that came after war, when the land held its breath, and the living wondered what must come next. A soft footfall drew her attention. Podrick Payne stumbled into view, his lantern casting a wavering glow on damp, oaken boards. His face, usually flushed with the steady warmth of youth, was drawn now with worry, as if the weight of the coming day pressed his very soul flat. "Sir Brienne?" he murmured, eyes wide beneath his copper hair. "The Queen rises. She will hold her council at first light." Brienne inclined her head. "Yes, I will go to her. Keep watch here until I return." He shifted, uncertain. My lady Sansa." His voice caught. "She depends on you, Sir Brienne. More than on any other." Brienne's chest tightened. "I know that," she said quietly. She had faced down her own fear many times. The fear of dishonor, of failing, of dying. But none of these matched the dread she felt for what could come if she failed the wolf princess she had sworn to protect. She turned and strode away, boots thudding on the hastily laid boards that formed a bridge between the wall and the ramparts. The wind tugged at her cloak, and she felt the first chill of dawn in her bones. Beneath her helm, her hair lay plastered to her brow, but she did not brush it away. There was no time for vanity, and besides, the sight of it tore at old wounds she preferred to keep closed. At the top of the spiral staircase, Sansa waited, wrapped in a cloak of dark green velvet, a silver wolf's head clasped on her shoulder. Her auburn hair had been braided with strands of winter berries and fresh spruce, small symbols of her reign's promise, resilience, renewal. She was younger now than the woman who had fled King's Landing, her features sharper, her eyes steeled by hardship rather than softened by hope. Yet when she saw Brienne, her lips curved in a tired smile, and Brienne would have sworn her heart palpitated like a war drum. "Good morning," Sansa said, voice low but firm. "Is the guard ready?" Brienne knelt, lowering her helm. "Always, my queen. My life is yours, in shadow and in light." Sansa's gaze flicked over her. On the fine chainmail, the tarnished greaves, the outward scars on her armor. For a moment, she did not speak, and Brienne felt the weight of her scrutiny like a blade pressed to her neck. Then Sansa nodded, almost imperceptibly. "We begin then." Their steps echoed as they walked down the stone corridor to the hall where the northern lords had gathered. The Stark's bannermen, weary from wars that had ravaged their lands. Nobles whose faces told stories of sons lost and daughters married off to seal fealty. All eyes turned as they entered, and Brienne stiffened, every muscle prepared for the violence she would gladly unleash if any dared threaten her queen. Sansa's voice, when she spoke, was clear and measured. "My lords, my ladies, thank you for your loyalty, your sacrifices. You know I stand before you not for glory, but to secure our home, to protect the North from those who would see it broken." "Men?" A murmur ran through the hall. Brienne remained at Sansa's shoulder, unblinking sentinel. "Lady Lyanna Mormont." Sansa continued, nodding toward the young bear of Bear Island. "What news from the Iron Islands?" Lyanna, diminutive but fierce, rose on her stool and spoke of skirmishes with reavers, who tested her brother's fleet after Balon's passing. Then the Blackfish's nephew, Brynden Tully, spoke of unrest among the Riverlands. Each report was met with solemn nods, until at last, a silence fell. It was then that Brienne noticed him. A man brought in that morning, hooded and bound in rough leather straps. He was led by two heavy-shouldered guards. His head hung, but as he passed Brienne, his gaze flicked upward. She saw the dark circles under his eyes, the bruise across his cheek, the sallow skin of one who had tasted winter rations far too long. He did not scowl. He did not plead. He simply looked at her, and though his eyes were sunken, they held a fierce intelligence. He was no common ruffian. Sansa paused mid-sentence. "Bring him forward." The guards complied. Brienne's hand hovered near her sword hilt. She had never drawn it before the king in the north, but the memory of the old days, the days of Stannis, of Renly, of Oathkeeper's first waking in her hand, told her this would not end peacefully. Sansa looked at the man. "You are accused of smuggling Lannister coin across the Wolfswood and supplying a group calling themselves the Dispossessed." He lifted his head. His voice, when he spoke, was soft but steady. "I only did what was necessary to feed my family." A hush. Brienne's gaze flicked to Sansa's. Her queen did not flinch. "Your family?" Sansa repeated. "And your price?" "Silver," he said. "But more than that, I promised them a better life. Safe from the hunger. They were starving, my queen." One of the northern lords barked a laugh. "So you turned traitor for scraps of bread?" His dark eyes flashed. "Would you starve, Lord Forrester?" A drum of quiet tension. Brienne shifted, her gauntlet brushing the hilt of Oathkeeper. The sword had been reforged for her in King's Landing from ice, the stark blade that once was. It bore Sansa's sigil now, the direwolf, etched finely on the guard. Each time Brienne looked at it, she felt the echo of the vow she had sworn. To protect the innocent, to stand against injustice. Sansa raised a hand. "Enough." The young lord resumed his seat, and Brienne felt her muscles unclench slightly. Sansa turned to the smuggler. "You risked much, but where loyalty and honor should lie, you placed coin." She paused, gaze steady. "You will repay your debts to the north. You will serve in the mills until your coin is used to rebuild that which you sought to undermine." "And now, sure." A murmur of approval. Brienne felt something soft stir in her chest. Pride in her queen's mercy. When the council broke, Brienne escorted Sansa back through the quiet halls. Snow still lingered at the windowsills, and the scent of burning pine drifted from the kitchens. "My lady," Brienne said softly as they reached Sansa's solar. "Your mercy was great. Few lords would show such restraint." Sansa shrugged off her cloak, her cheeks pale beneath the morning light. "We are no longer fighting for vengeance, Brienne. We fight to build Duel." Brienne knelt as Sansa sat at her desk, hands clasped around a cup of spiced wine. She could not taste it, but she imagined its warmth creeping through Sansa's bones, easing the ache of sleepless nights. "You rest," Brienne said. "I will stand guard." Sansa's smile was as fragile as spun glass. "Promise me you will eat." Brienne bowed her head. "I promise." She left Sansa's quarters, the door closing with a soft thud. In the corridor, she paused before the tapestry of House Stark. A red direwolf on a field of white. Her reflection shimmered in the polished breastplate she had left by the door. Brienne of Tarth, of lesser birth than many who had sworn fealty to Sansa, yet risen to stand at her side. The life she lived now was impossible, yet here she stood. Night bled into day. The sun climbed higher, and riders returned from the fields, their faces grim with news of patchwork harvests and wounded men. Brienne moved among them, offering aid where she could. A crushed toe bandaged, a wounded shoulder set, words of encouragement to the fallen. No one dared speak ill of Sansa while Brienne bore witness. As dusk settled, Sansa summoned her guard. Brienne drew on her cloak and followed. They walked through the torchlit halls to the battlements once more, where the wind howled like a beast in the night. The stars were bright, pinpricks of ice in a black cloth. Sansa stood at the edge, gazing out over the land she would rule. "My queen," Brienne murmured. Sansa did not turn. "Do you think I am ready?" Brienne knelt, her knees sounding against the stone. "You have all the strength of your house, and more. You guide us, Lady Sansa. You are the North's hope." Brienne. Sansa's breath came out in a plume of mist. "Sometimes I wonder if hope is enough." Brienne straightened, placing a gauntleted hand on Sansa's shoulder. "Hope, and those who will defend it." Sansa looked at her then, blue eyes shining bright and haunted. "And you, Brienne of Tarth, will you defend the North to the last?" "I will defend you," Brienne said, "to my last breath." A silence fell between them, heavy with promises and fears. Then Sansa reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Brienne's cheek. "Thank you." And in that touch lay a world of unspoken words, of loyalty unshaken, of gratitude beyond measure, of a bond forged in blood and snow and tempered by loss. Brienne too wanted to say more. She wanted to promise Sansa the moon and the stars, to tell her that darkness would never claim her while she drew breath. But she did not speak. Instead, she drew her sword and slid the scabbard from her hip, then knelt once more. With a hand as gentle as a winter rose, Sansa placed the scabbard across Brienne's shoulders. Brienne closed her eyes for a moment, tasting the cold steel against her neck. "By my sword, my shield, my life," Sansa whispered. "I name you commander of the Queen's Guard." Brienne rose, oathkeeper in hand, its blade catching the torchlight and sending shards of flame dancing across the stone. She knelt at Sansa's feet, head bowed. "My queen," she said, voice low and choked. Sansa laid a hand on her cheek. "Rise, Sir Brienne." As she rose, Brienne felt the weight of her new title settle on her shoulders, heavier than any armor, more precious than any jewel. She looked down at Sansa, and in that gaze she saw the North itself, proud, unbowed, chasing a fragile dream of peace. She swore her oath again, in silence this time, in the language of steel and heart. And all around them, Winterfell held its breath, waiting to see if she would keep it. A.K. Ainda. Brienne stood beneath the torchlit parapets of Winterfell long after the ceremony had ended. The banners of House Stark billowed overhead, their gray direwolves leaping against the red fields. All around her, the Queen's Guard assembled in uneasy clusters. Men and women chosen from the most loyal houses, their armor polished and their swords keen. But none of them wore the weight of command against their shoulders as Brienne did. Oathkeeper hung at her hip, its blade silent yet alive. She closed her eyes and breathed deep, tasting the cold air of responsibility. When dawn broke again over the Wolfswood, the castle stirred to life. Sansa Stark moved through her chambers with purpose, poring over maps, meeting with her small council, and answering the petitions of lords who came seeking justice or favor. Brienne shadowed her at every turn, her eyes ever vigilant, even when Sansa thought herself unobserved. Their bond had deepened beyond the formalities of knight and queen. In every glance and every unspoken understanding, Brienne felt the pulse of Sansa's trust. On the third day of her new office, Brienne accompanied Sansa to the rookery, where ravens cooed in their iron cages. The Queen's message to King's Landing was ready to be dispatched. Sansa's handwriting was precise, each stroke deliberate. An invitation to parley with House Arryn, and a request for their aid in rebuilding the North's roads and granaries. Brienne watched the great raven, its ink-black feathers ruffled by the bustle in the courtyard. "A fine letter," Brienne murmured, as Sansa sealed it with wax. Again. Her voice held a cautious warmth. Sansa nodded, her expression distant. "We cannot afford to wait on winter's mercy. The roads to the Fingers are impassable, and the fishermen of White Harbor complain of roving bands who prey on their carts." She hesitated, then asked quietly, "Do you think Lord Royce will answer?" Brienne's hand closed around the quill for a moment, before she set it aside. "Lord Royce honors his word, my queen. He respected your mother's counsel and served your family loyally. He will come, if he can." She did not add that the Vale's own troubles weighed on him. The Arryns had been shaken since Robin's fall, and the Vale lords were at odds over regency. But she would press that matter if Sansa so desired. "Good," Sansa said, turning to the window where the courtyard lay brightening under the morning sun. "We must rebuild, Brienne. The North needs more than knights." She paused, looking back at Brienne. "I need you too." Brienne bowed her head. "I am yours." In council, as well as in battle. It was in that quiet moment that destiny first stirred. Word arrived that a company of sellswords, men in mismatched plate and leather, their banners unfamiliar, had been spotted moving south from the Shadow Tower. Some claimed they sought employment with the Starks. Others whispered they were scouts for a greater threat beyond the wall. Rumor ran that a wildling raiding party had coalesced, emboldened by the disappearance of Mance Raiders' remnants. The couriers spoke of burned hamlets and missing flocks. By the afternoon, Sansa convened a meeting in the Great Hall. The long tables were set with maps and the bones of ravens. Lords and ladies of the realm took their seats on high-backed chairs of carved oak. Brienne stood at Sansa's right, her gauntleted hands clasped before her. "My lords," Sansa began, voice carrying across the chamber. "Our scouts report a contingent of rogue sellswords moving through the Wolf's Wood. They claim to seek our protection, but I fear their intentions are less honorable. I intend to send a company to parley with them, to learn their purpose and bind them to our cause if we must. Sir Brienne of Tarth will lead this mission." A murmur swelled. The lords looked at Brienne with unmasked surprise. She had barely claimed her title, and already she was to ride beyond the walls. Lord Manderley of White Harbor cleared his throat. "Forgive my question, Your Grace, but perhaps one of our own knights." He gestured towards Sir Jory Castle and other northern commanders. Sansa raised a hand. "Sir Brienne has proven her worth in war and council. She holds the trust of the Queen's Guard and my own." Her gaze met Brienne's. "I choose her." Brienne bowed deeply. "I will not fail you, my queen." The courtiers nodded, and the meeting moved on to supplies and routes. Brienne took her leave at sunset. In the courtyard, her company gathered. A dozen mounted knights, a handful of spear carriers, and half a score of hardened scouts. Podrick Payne approached, his cheeks flushed with both excitement and dread. "You'll ride at dawn, sir," he said, voice low. Brienne placed a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you, Podrick. Watch the walls until my return." He nodded, swallowing. "Will you be safe?" She allowed herself a small, rueful smile. "I bear your queen's trust. That alone should see me through." Morning came with a wind that cut through cloaks and rattled the guidons. Sansa and the ruling council watched the departure from the battlements. Brienne's banner, a black breastplate with a silver direwolf, fluttered in the breeze. When Sansa blinked, Brienne gave a single nod of reassurance, as though to say, "I am yours." The road south was treacherous. The Wolfswood's pines stood gaunt and skeletal, their needles fallen as winter's frost crunched beneath horses' hooves. Brienne rode at the front, her face set in determination. The Sellsword Company lay some 10 leagues ahead in a clearing by an abandoned mill. Brienne halted her knights at the tree line, ordering scouts forward. They returned with news of tents and campfires, of a motley host armed with swords old and new. Some bore the colors of Dornish mercenaries, others the livery of free cities. Their captains quarreled in harsh tongues. Brienne studied their positions. A makeshift stockade of wagons, ringed by sharpened stakes. A wooden palisade that had seen better days. At noon, Brienne rode forth with a white banner of truce. 2 of her knights accompanied her. The rest formed a cordon in the trees. As they approached the camp, a chorus of muttered curses and exclamations rose. A lean man stepped forward, a bastard's blade at his hip and a cloak of blue and white draped over his shoulders. His dark hair was tied back, revealing eyes that flicked over Brienne's armor. "Who leads?" he called, voice carrying. "I am Sir Brienne of Tarth, commander of the Queen's Guard to Sansa Stark, Queen in the North," Brienne replied. "I come to learn your purpose in these woods." The sellswords spat. Sellswords answer to coin, Sir Knight. Northless lords know the price of our service. He spat again. What coin have you? Brienne held his gaze. My queen offers land and titles to those who will defend her realm. You need not bleed your own. Serve under her sigil, and she will see you fed and clothed. The sellsword laughed, a sound as harsh as gravel. Titles, land. The North's blood runs cold. Few would trust Lannister blood or Dornish blades here. He flicked his gaze to the two knights behind Brienne. We're not fools. Brienne did not flinch. Then speak plainly. What do you see? A low murmur went through the tents. The sellsword commander, his name Captain Cal, raised a hand. We marched to the wall. He leaned forward, as if sharing a secret. We've heard rumors. The flayed men march beyond the wall, and the king beyond the wall is gathering an army. He'll come south if no one stops him. Brienne's breath caught. The wall had stood for millennia, but its magic was waning. Its lords distracted by southern wars. If true, wildling forces beneath a single banner could ravage the north in winter's dark. She suppressed a surge of dread. Why speak of this to me? She asked. Because we mean to fight. Sir Knight. But not for coin alone. We want a cause worth bleeding for. He studied her eyes. Offer us that, and we will stand with the North. Brienne nodded once. Return to your tents. I will report to my queen. Rest and prepare. The North needs swords more than ever. Captain Cal inclined his head. At dawn we await your signal. That night, Brienne's knights bivouacked at the ruined mill. She sent a rider back to Winterfell with her report. Sellswords prepared to fight the wildlings in the queen's name. As she lay on her cloak beneath the stars, Brienne thought of Sansa, alone in her solar, poring over ravens' bones and portents, desperate to hold her people together. In the darkness, Brienne swore again to guard her queen from every threat, mortal or otherwise. When her horse returned to Winterfell days later, the gates were thrown open. Riders cheered as she entered with Captain Cal's army trailing behind, their motley banners now draped with the direwolf. Sansa emerged onto the battlements above, her cloak billowing. Tears glistened on her cheeks. Welcome home, she called. Brienne dismounted and knelt, Captain Cal beside her. They have sworn fealty to you, my queen. Their swords and their lives are yours. Sansa descended the steps, her skirt swirling, and laid a hand on Brienne's shoulder. You gave them purpose. You did more than any council could. I owe you more than words. Brienne rose, oathkeeper in hand. Words are for lords. I serve with my sword. Sansa smiled. A smile that held both sorrow and pride. Then rise, commander. For today we celebrate our new allies, but tomorrow we march to the wall. The crowd cheered. Brienne glanced at Captain Cal, whose hardened features softened. Together, they rode through Winterfell's courtyard, leading the sellswords past the ranks of the Queen's Guard. Lord Manderley offered a small bow, and Lord Lyanna murmured, Brienne of Tarth, you have done what no other could. But Brienne's eyes found Sansa stark alone, standing at the throne of ice and stone. In that moment, Brienne realized that her service would be measured not in the battles she won, but in the hardships she bore alongside her queen. With every dawn, the North's fate would rest in their hands. As the sun dipped below the Wolfswood, Brienne stood once more on the battlements. The wind carried the distant cry of ravens from the rookery and the clatter of armor in the courtyard. Somewhere beyond the wall, her army gathered. Somewhere to the south, King's Landing stirred at her queen's challenge. And here, in the cold heart of Winterfell, Brienne of Tarth, knight, guardian, commander, prepared to stand fast against the coming storm. For Sansa Stark, for the North, and for the fragile hope that binds them all. Brienne woke before dawn, as she had for weeks, muscles aching from the march north, yet mind alert with purpose. The camp lay silent beneath a sky bruised with the promise of winter's return. Tents clustered around the bones of the old mill, their stout canvas pale in the lantern glow. The sellswords and knights she had marshaled slept fitfully, some clutching their swords as if in dreams of battle, others huddled around dying embers, wrapping themselves in furs against the cold. She donned her armor in the quiet pre-dawn, fastening each strap with practiced precision. Oathkeeper's steel gleamed even in the dim light, its blade as white as new-fallen snow. As commander of the Queen's Guard, her duties extended beyond mere tactics. She had become the living symbol of hope for this ragtag army. She paused before a trapdoor leading into the mill's lower chambers, where provisions were stored. A single lantern flickered there, casting long shadows on the stone walls. "Sir Brienne?" A soft voice startled her. Podrick Payne emerged from the darkness, hair mussed, cloak stained with dew. He carried a small bundle of bread and cheese. "I thought you'd want something before the march," he said, cheeks flushed with cold and worry. She inclined her head. "Thank you, Podrick." Taking the food, she handed him a spare cloak. "You should rest. When the command goes out, I will call for you." He blinked, uncertain. Will you be all right?" She allowed herself a small smile. "I bear the Queen's hope. It is heavier than any blade, but I will carry it." He nodded, relief and awe mingling in his eyes. "I will pray for your victory." Brienne watched him slip away, and then emerged into the cold air. Riders were already preparing their mounts, 300 strong when the Sellswords joined them. The horses stamped and whinnied, breath steaming in the frosty air. Brienne found Captain Call, his crossed, arms bearing the dirk scars that told of his many fights. "Everything in readiness?" she asked. He nodded, his dark eyes bright. "They are eager, sir. They trust in your command." She studied him. He was a lean man, hardened by years on the road. His Sellswords had learned discipline under her watch. "Good. We ride at sunrise. Keep your men ready." "Ben too?" "Ben." As the first light smudged the horizon, Brienne sounded the horn. The note echoed through the trees like a challenge. One by one the companies mounted, banners unfurled. The black direwolf of the Starks, the white sable of Tarth, and the tattered standards of the Sellswords now pledged to the north. Brienne rode at the head, flanked by her guard. Sir Mark Piper, Sir Lorden of the Knuckle, and a dozen northern knights whose loyalty was forged in the blood of war. Behind them came Sansa's ravens, their great wings beating the cold air before settling on the saddle pommels of riders. News would travel swiftly, should they fail. Yet Brienne refused to contemplate failure. Every mile brought them closer to the wall, and to the winter's storm. They followed the ancient road north, hewn through the wolfswood. The trees formed silent sentinels, their branches heavy with ice. Wolves lurked in the shadows beyond torchlight, drawn by the promise of stray horses or halfling stragglers. At midday, they made a brief halt at Last Hearth, the seat of House Umber. The castle's gates opened warily. The Umbers had trusted Warbans before and paid for it. Yet Sansa's letter bore the Queen's seal, and the Lord of Last Hearth, gray hair matted and face gaunt, greeted Brienne with a curt nod. "Lady Westwood warned me you'd come," he rasped, wiping ash from his hands. "They say she rides with the Sellswords now." Brienne nodded. "They ride for the north, my lord. Their swords and loyalty were pledged by your queen." The lord squared his shoulders. "Then you have my hearth and my men." He summoned a dozen spearmen and promised guides to lead them through the most treacherous passes. Brienne thanked him and pressed on, the Umbers trailing in her wake until the trees swallowed them. Night fell as they approached the Shadow Tower. The wall loomed ahead, a jagged spine of ice and stone rising 100 feet into the starlit sky. Black-clad rangers patrolled the ramparts, their dark cloaks flapping in the wind. Brienne's heart quickened. She had served the old Baratheon king beyond this barrier. She had never seen it so vulnerable. A horn sounded from the wall. A score of rangers rode down the wooden ramp, their faces set in grim lines. John Roxton, a veteran ranger with a jagged scar across his cheek, led them. "Sir Brienne," he greeted, voice a low rumble. "The wall stands, but our strength wanes. The wildlings grew bold these last moons." She studied his face. "We ride to meet them, Ranger Roxton. My Sellswords stand with us." He let out a short laugh. "Your Sellswords? What hope have we in cutthroats?" She met his gaze steadily. They have honor enough to fight for a cause greater than coin. I will prove it. Menefshao. He nodded once. Then welcome to the wall, Commander. We have food, a few supplies, and a message from Castle Black. The Lord Commander himself awaits your counsel. At that, Brienne felt the weight of destiny shift. She dismounted and led her companion to the wall's base. The great gate swung open, revealing a courtyard of packed snow. Men in black fur marched past, muskets and spears at the ready. A sentry led her to the Lord Commander's hall, a stout building carved into the ice. Inside, the Lord Commander, an austere man named Edric Locke, stood before a table strewn with maps and raven scrolls. He looked every bit the fallen noble, broad-shouldered, graying beard, eyes rimmed by fatigue. "Commander Brienne," he said, voice echoing off the stone. "I have heard of your deeds. Your queen sends her thanks, though the wall answers to no throne." Brienne inclined her head. "I come to offer our strength to the Night's Watch, and to stand with you against the threat beyond." He studied her. "Your Sellswords do not fight in winter. They have families, debts. Why risk them here?" "Menshao." She drew a breath. "Because this threat is greater than any gold. If the wildlings, and what they gather, breach the wall, all of us will pay the price. Sansa Stark has opened the North's doors to them. They will answer to the Queen, or they will die." A long silence. Then the Lord Commander pushed aside the maps and gestured for her to approach. "Show me what you know." For 2 hours they conferred, watching the patterns of raven flights, the scouts' reports of wildling camps, and the rumors of then warlocks and giants stirring in the north. Brienne suggested moving the Sellswords to the Fist of the First Men, where the wall's western flank was weakest, and to fortify the abattis with sharpened stakes. She proposed training the Sellswords with the Rangers, pairing them in patrols to teach discipline and stealth. When they emerged into the courtyard, the air was blue with cold. Brienne breathed deep, tasting the metal tang of war and snow. She turned to the Lord Commander. "They leave at first light," she said. "I will lead them." He nodded. "May the old gods guard you, Sir Knight." That night, Brienne stood once more beneath the wall, leaning against the frosted stone. Somewhere above, crows cawed their vigil. Podrick approached, his cloak fur stiff with frost. "They await your orders," he said softly. She nodded. "At dawn we strike north. Until then, rest, or as much as you can." He inclined his head and moved away, leaving her in the hush. Brienne closed her eyes, letting the weight of her responsibility settle. She thought of Sansa, back in Winterfell, trusting her to hold the line against darkness. She thought of the Sellswords, whose hearts she had won with words and deeds, now poised on the edge of battle. And she thought of the wall itself, a crumbling barrier against chaos. Dawn came on a wind of steel. Brienne assembled her force at the wall's base. 300 Sellswords, 50 knights, and 40 rangers. They formed in ranks beneath the wall, banners torn but bright against the white. Captain Kyle stood by her side, axe in hand, his Sellsword captains arrayed behind him. Brienne raised her sword. "Men of the north and of the road, today we ride not for coin, nor for titles, nor for vengeance. We ride for home, for hearth, for winter's end. We ride for the Queen in Winterfell, and for every child who sleeps with nightmares of wildling blades. We ride to prove that honor still lives, here beneath the wall." Then, a roar answered her, a thunder of voices that shook the frozen ground. The Sellswords slammed their swords on shields. The Rangers drew bows, arrows at the ready. Brienne raised her sword and led them toward the gate. The wall's great door swung open with a groan, and they poured onto the snow-covered plains beyond. The western flank of the wall, long neglected, lay broken by centuries of ice. Brienne's scouts had found a hidden postern, half buried by drifting snow. Moving swiftly, the Rangers led the force through this narrow pass, skirts of ice crunching underfoot. Brienne's mind raced through every possibility: ambush, frostbite, betrayal. But she trusted her men. Sellswords who had bled beside knights, Rangers who had faced the cold alone. At midday, they crested a ridge and saw the wildling encampment. Tents scarred the earth in a ragged horseshoe. Fires burned in pits, sending smoke into the gray sky. Dozens of wildlings stood at the ready, their weapons crude. Bone axes, rusted swords, but their numbers were twice Brienne's. Giants loomed in the distance, hulking shapes against the ice. She held up her sword. "For the north!" she shouted. "For the queen!" The charge was a roar of steel and fury. Brienne led from the front, Oathkeeper striking true, its white blade dancing through the air. Sons of the free folk met them with screaming war cries. Arrows rained from the flanks as rangers let loose their deadly volleys. The Sellswords held their line, disciplined blocks and thrusts driving back the wildlings. Brienne pivoted, her helm battered, breath steaming. She saw Captain Khal at her side, his axe swinging in wide arcs. They fought as one, a blade and an axe, cutting a path through the horde. When a giant charged, Brienne backed, luring it toward Khal, who drove his axe into its knee. The creature roared, toppling, and Brienne finished it with a strike to the skull. The battle swayed with brutal unpredictability. Wildlings surged forward in waves, but the Northmen and Sellswords held firm. As the sun dipped low, the tide turned. Captain Khal seized a fallen warp banner and raised it high, the direwolf on ice-blue sky. It rallied the troops. A final push shattered the wildling line. They broke and fled, warriors running for the woods, leaving their dead and their wounded behind, panting, bloodied. Brienne surveyed the field. Dozens lay dead, more moaned in the snow. She raised a hand. "Hold!" The survivors slowed, forming a ring of spears around the wounded. "Gather arms and men. Tend the injured." Da. Rangers moved to help, fools though Brienne once thought them. Now her comrades, the Sellswords, their faces streaked with blood and sweat, knelt to tend the injured, cutting clothing to stanch wounds, sharing water. Brienne herself knelt beside a young ranger whose leg was caught in a trap. She pried the iron jaws open with a crowbar, her knuckles white, and whispered words of comfort. As the sky darkened, they built a small camp from the wildling tents. Fires warmed the wounded. The rangers brought boiled broth. Brienne sat by her army, exhaustion weighing on her like a second cuirass. Captain Khal approached, leaning on his axe. "We held," he said simply. She nodded, voice hoarse. "We did." He studied her for a moment. "You have given these men purpose. They will follow you anywhere." Her throat tightened. "They have given me their honor." He smiled faintly. "Your queen would be proud." Brienne looked northward, toward the wall's icy shadow. Beyond lay the unknown, more wildlings perhaps, and the darker things that stirred in the winter's heart. But here, on this bloodied field, she had proven her command, her vow to Sansa Stark and the North. At last, Brienne stood, forging a silent promise in her mind, to press on beyond this victory, to ensure that the wall held, that peace returned to the North, for Sansa, for Winterfell, for the fragile hope that bound them all. And as the fires crackled and the night deepened, Brienne of Tarth, commander of the Queen's Guard, stepped forward into legend. Now. Brienne awoke before the first glimmer of dawn, her rest as restless as the world beyond the wall. The camp lay silent, broken only by the soft breathing of wounded men, and the distant scrape of iron against stone, as Night's Watch brothers prepared arms. She rose on one elbow, tasting the cold air heavy with pine smoke and blood. Around her, fires guttered, sending sparks into the frosty sky. The ache in her shoulders from yesterday's battle was all but drowned by the hollow pull in her gut, the weight of what must come next. She crouched by the nearest fire, soaking bread in warmed broth, the thin meal filling her more with comfort than sustenance. Podrick sat opposite, staring into the flames. When she looked up, his eyes held both admiration and fear. "They wake soon," he murmured. "The rangers say the wildlings have regrouped. They will try again." Brienne nodded, swallowing the last of her broth. "Then we give them no quarter." She reached out, placing a gauntleted hand on his. "Stay ready, Pod, and keep your sword close." He gave a small, tight smile and rose, slipping away into the gloom. By the time the sky bled pale gray, Brienne had mustered her force. 300 sellswards, 50 Stark knights, and 40 rangers. Many lay wounded, but healed enough to ride. She donned her breastplate and strapped Oathkeeper to her hip, the steel singing faintly. At her side rode Captain Coll, axe slung over one shoulder, and Sir Mark Piper, a weathered knight whose calm steadied them all. They moved to the wall's foot, where the Lord Commander and his captains awaited. Edric Locke met her, eyes weary but resolute. "Sir Brienne," he said, "the wall holds, but only just. We need to push beyond, strike at the source." She met his gaze. "We must follow the wildlings to their camp, and break them before they gather the giants and warlocks they call kin. Delay will only strengthen them." He nodded. "Very well, you lead. The watch will hold the wall." A horn sounded, and Brienne raised her sword. "To the snows north of the wall, for Winterfell, for the Queen." The mixed host answered with a roar that shook the wall's base. They crossed through the postern gate, descending onto the ice-strewn plains. The land beyond was bleak, endless white pierced by the dark shapes of frozen pines. Wolves howled in the distance. Brienne kept her cavalry close, scouts combing ahead for signs of the wildling encampment. Mid-morning, the scouts returned with grim news. The wildlings had moved camp, drawn deeper into the ruins of an ancient watchtower. Its shattered stone walls lay half-buried in drifted snow. A perfect stronghold. Brienne gathered her captains. "They will think themselves safe," she said, tracing the tower's outline on a scrap of hide. "We will split our force. Captain Coll, you take the eastern ridge with 50 sellswards and the rangers. Sir Piper, you hold the center with our knights. I will lead the flank, striking into the camp itself." Then Toll. The captains nodded, and at her command, the columns formed. Brienne felt the familiar surge of steel in her veins. This was her element. As they crept toward the tower, the wind rose, whipping snow into their faces. Brienne's ears rang with the metallic creak of armor. When they reached the ridge, she halted them. Below, the wildling tents clustered around fires and stockades of sharpened logs. Dozens of fighters moved between them, their leather jerkins smeared with soot and blood. Brienne raised her hand. At her signal, the gale petals of snow stirred as hundreds of arrows sailed into the sky and descended in a deadly hail upon the enemy. Wildlings fell with gasps, screaming curses. Captain Coll led the eastern assault, his axe striking true. The Watch and Stark knights crashed into the center, cutting swaths through the camp. Brienne spurred her horse down the hillside, drawing Oathkeeper. She landed in the thick of it, her blade flashing white in the gray light. Wildling chieftains met her with heavy axes and bone-tipped spears. Brienne parried, her arm a pillar of steel. She moved like water, flowing, unstoppable, until the camp's heart lay broken. By the time the sun stood high, the fighting ceased. The survivors fled into the woods, half frozen, half crazed with fear. Brienne surveyed the carnage, chest heaving. Around her, the sellswards knelt to tend their dead, while rangers gathered bodies to burn. She felt a hand on her shoulder and turned to see the Lord Commander. "You have done what few could," he said quietly. She dipped her head. "For the North, for Sansa Stark." He studied her. "And for the wall." He handed her a folded raven scroll, its seal broken. A message from Winterfell. Brienne broke the seal with shaking fingers. The parchment bore Sansa's spidery script. "Brienne, your victory at the Shadow Tower heralds hope for the North, but new dangers stir to the south. The Lannisters have mustered armies beyond the Twins, and the Boltons press from the Riverlands. I send ravens to River Run and the Vale to gather aid. Return to Winterfell when you can. Your wisdom is needed as much as your blade. In your service, Sansa Stark." Brienne's heart clenched. She rolled the scroll and slipped it into her breastplate. "My queen needs me," she whispered. The Lord Commander nodded. "And you have earned every chance to see her again. The watch will hold. Ride south with the sellswards and the rangers you have trained. Bring them to Winterfell's gates." She lifted Oathkeeper. "Then we ride." Piloting her force back through the snowy wastes, Brienne felt the winds of destiny at her back. She thought of Sansa, poring over maps in a dim solar, forging alliances, bearing a crown too heavy for her shoulders. And Brienne would ride to her side once more. The journey south was grueling. The snows gave way to Rockies of bare stone, then to the vast green of the Wolfswood thawing into spring. Along the way, they gathered stray villages, torn by raiders, and invited them to join the Queen's cause. Brienne sealed vows with minor lords, while Captain Coll and the Rangers demonstrated the strength of unity. At last, Winterfell rose before them, its towers gleaming in the late afternoon sun. Banners of the North and of Tarth flew side by side. A cheer rose from the walls as Brienne led the column through the gates. In the courtyard, Sansa awaited, flanked by her small council, Lord Royce of the Vale, Lady Mormont, and Lord Manderley. Sansa rushed forward, eyes bright with tears. "Brienne," she cried, and the Queen embraced her protector as though for dear life. Brienne bowed stiffly, but the iron in her heart melted at that embrace. "My Queen." Behind them, Captain Coll dismounted and offered his axe. "I pledge my sword to the North, to Sansa Stark." Lord Royce stepped forward, inclining his head. "And I too pledge the Knights of the Vale." Lady Mormont and Lord Manderley nodded, and soon the hall rang with oaths renewed. Sansa stood in the center, a queen forged by fire, and Brienne at her side, a shield as strong as the ancient wall. When the pledging ended, Sansa led Brienne to her solar. The room was scattered with letters and maps. As firelight danced across her face, Sansa looked up with those clear blue eyes. "You have done more than I ever hoped," she said softly. "The North stands because of you." Brienne knelt, lowering her helm. "I only keep the vows I swore. To serve you, to protect this realm." Sansa reached out, gripping Brienne's hand. "Then rise, Commander, for the war is far from over." Brienne stood, feeling the burden lift even as new weight settled on her shoulders. "What is your command?" Sansa unrolled a map of the Riverlands and beyond. "We must break the Bolton Rebellion, secure the river crossings, free River Run, and then march on King's Landing to end this war, once and for all." Brienne traced the lines with her finger. "Then we gather our armies, the Vale, the North, the Sellswords, even the Night's Watch. We march as one." "Majesty." Sansa smiled, tired, determined, radiant. Ace won. And so it was decided that the banners of the Wolf and the Stag, of Tarth and of the Vale, would ride south together. Brienne of Tarth would lead as commander of the Queen's Guard, her blade a beacon of hope across the lands of Westeros. That night, in the Great Hall, Brienne stood beside Sansa Tarth. The lords feasted and drank, the hall alive with music and laughter, tempered by the knowledge of battles to come. Torchlight flickered on Brienne's armor, and she felt for the first time since the days of Renly and Stannis, a moment's peace. Sansa leaned toward her. "Tomorrow we ride." Brienne nodded, eyes on the dancing flames. "Tomorrow, we ride for justice. For the North. For you." And as the revelry swirled, Brienne of Tarth, once a lone knight of little renown, stood at the heart of a kingdom reborn. Her oath fulfilled, her destiny entwined with that of the Queen in the North, and the fragile hope of a land rising from the ashes of war. Ah. Ha. Oh. Brienne rose with the dawn's pale light, muscles weary but spirit renewed. The great hall still murmured with laughter from the night's feast. Lords and ladies of the Vale and the North, sellswords and rangers rubbing shoulders in tentative camaraderie. Now beneath Winterfell's banner-laden walls, the armies mustered for their march southward. Brienne, mounted on her black destrier, scanned the ranks. Stark men-at-arms in their gray and red cloaks, knights of the Vale in sky blue and white, the sellswords in their patchwork leathers, now bound together by a common cause. All looked to her. Podrick, perched on his mount beside her, caught her eye and nodded. She offered him a small smile of reassurance. The weight of command pressed heavy on her shoulders, every life among these ranks entrusted to her judgment. But she would not fail. At the vanguard rode Lord Royce and Lady Lyanna Mormont, their banners snapping in the wind. To Brienne's right, Sansa Stark took her place upon a white palfrey, face composed, hair braided with the colors of the North and the Vale. Sansa caught Brienne's eye and inclined her head, a silent charge to press on, to do what duty demanded. Their column moved out through Winterfell's gates, leaving behind the flickering torches and the warmth of home. Ahead lay the King's Road to the Trident, road still scarred by the long war. The first stop was the Twins, where Lord Frey still held halfway loyalty to the Boltons. Intelligence had reached them that the Freys would allow safe passage, so long as the crossing was unopposed, but Brienne knew nothing could be taken for granted. The journey south was brisk. Brienne's men set a hard pace by day and made camp by night beneath oaks and willows, where streams ran cold and clear. Along the way they were joined by minor bannermen. Houses Karstark and Umber rode in, having heeded the Queen's summons, their numbers swelling the ranks. Each addition brought new supplies and fresh spirits, but also fresh burdens of training and discipline. Brienne and her captains held daily drills, formations for spearmen, cavalry charges, and swift strikes for the sellswords accustomed to looser tactics. Nightly, she rode among the campfires, listening to concerns, bolstering morale, and reminding every man and woman of the oath they had sworn. To Sansa Stark, to the North, to a future free of tyranny. On the eve of their arrival at the Twins, Lord Royce called a council beneath the starlit sky. A half-circle of banners and lantern light framed the makeshift table. Starks, Arryns, Mormonts, Manderleys, and Brienne's own captains. A map of the river crossings lay spread before them, the Green Fork and the Red Fork, marked in charcoal. The Frey garrison numbers 200 men, Royce said, tracing the blue line of the Green Fork. They disapprove of the Boltons but fear House Manderley's ambition. They may block the crossing unless convinced otherwise. Lord Manderley cleared his throat. I can offer them grain and coin in Sansa's name. But the Frey bridegrooms are loyal to any house that pays. Lady Mormont, perched on a mossy stump, spat. Leave them to me. A sharp tongue and a sharper blade will convince them faster than gold. Brienne studied their faces. We'll need a two-pronged approach. A small detachment under Lady Mormont and Captain Call will flank the garrison at dawn, while Sansa and I hold the bridge proper with Lord Royce's knights. We display force, yet offer terms. Join our host or retire unharmed. Memsah. Sansa leaned forward, eyes bright in the lantern glow. I will parley. I will remind them what it means to betray the North. The plan set. They rested until dawn's first light. Brienne led the center with Royce and Sansa's guard. Lady Lyanna slipped away with 50 men and the sellsword contingents under Captain Cowell. When the sun crept over the horizon, Lady Lyanna's force emerged through the copse, silent as wolves. At the far bank, the Frey sentries blinked in surprise as Mormont's bear banner and Cal's war axe banner rose among the trees. Mormont strode forward, voice carrying across the water. Disgrace your house no further. Yield the bridge or face the North's wrath. Before the Freys could muster, Royce's knights thundered forward across the bridge, swords raised. Sensing their position untenable, the Frey captain offered terms. Sansa crossed the bridge under a white banner of truce, sealed the accord. Safe passage and oaths of neutrality in exchange for the Freys' remaining strength. As the Freys lowered their arms, Brienne felt the first true victory of the campaign. Whiffed, without needless bloodshed, the host reassembled on the western bank. Brienne saluted her queen. The way is open. The Bolton host awaits at the Whispering Wood beyond the Willow March. Their march resumed along muddy tracks that led toward the Riverland's heart. The forests there were dense and tangled, shadows hiding raiders and deserters. Brienne posted scouts at the flanks, pairing sellswords with rangers to root out ambushes. A dozen skirmishes tested their resolve. Wildfire barrels hurled from tree-lined paths, archers firing from hidden blinds. Yet each threat was met and driven back. The North's army holding its disciplined line. At dusk on the third day past the Twins, the lantern-lit tents of Riverrun came into view across the river's broad bend. The castle's gray walls lay dark, but on the parapets, torches gleamed, signals of welcome. Brynden Tully himself rode forth with a silver hunting horn. leading knights of pink trout and blue trout banners, his smile broad despite the years of siege and hardship. Sansa descended from her palfrey and embraced her uncle. River Run stands with the queen in the north, she declared, voice echoing along the walls. Brienne heard the cheers swell, and for a moment, brief as a shooting star, she allowed herself to feel relief. They had secured a fortress that would feed, house, and train their forces. Supplies and reinforcements would flow upriver from the twins. But Brienne's gaze remained on the horizon, where the Bolton banners, black flayed men on blood-red fields, still waved from the whispering wood. The final test awaited, a pitched battle to decide the fate of Westeros. That night, in the candlelit chamber of River Run, Sansa convened her captains. A rough table of lumber bore the map of the lands between River Run and Harrenhal. Brienne stood at the queen's side, sword belt brushed with fresh oil. The Boltons muster 1,500 men. Sam Tully informed them, mostly cavalry and mercenaries. Their strength is speed and ruthless charge. Then, they overrate their advantage, Brienne said, hand resting on Oathkeeper. Our infantry, bolstered with Riverland's levies and our sworn sellswords, can anchor the center. Vale Knights should wield the left flank along the Orchard Road, while the North's cavalry, led by Sir Clive, strikes the right. Sansa nodded. And I will join the reserve, ready to seal any breach or exploit any weakness. Lady Lyanna leaned forward. Then let us teach the Boltons that flayed men lose their hides. As the candle flames flickered, Brienne caught Sansa's eye. No words passed between them, but in that glance lay years of trust, hardship, and unbroken loyalty. The first light of dawn tomorrow would see armies clash beneath open skies, banners tear in wind and blood, and Brienne's blade once more sing its vow in the name of the Queen in the north. And so, their host arrayed beneath River Run's weary walls. Brienne of Tarth, commander of the Queen's Guard, prepared to lead Sansa Stark's armies into the maelstrom that would decide the fate of kingdoms. Yeah. How? Oh. Brienne woke before dawn, as was her custom. Though tonight's rest had been deeper than most of late, the air in River Run's outer bailey was crisp, bearing the promise of early spring even as a stubborn chill clung to the stones and flagged banners. In the flickering torchlight, the vast host, men and women from the north, the Vale and the Riverlands, augmented by sellswords sworn to Sansa Stark, stirred like a great beast rousing from slumber. Tents stood in precise ranks. Fire pits smoked, feeding ravenous appetites. Horses stamped and whinnied in their stalls. Here and there, the beaten faces of veterans, hard-eyed, weathered, emerged from rough blankets, while younger faces, awed and grim, watched the commanders moving among them. Brienne of Tarth walking the lines, sword strapped at her hip. Sir Lyn Arryn, starched in sky blue. Lord Glover's grizzled captains, nodding curtly at her as she passed. Captain Hal, silver beard lit by torch glare. She entered the field kitchen, where a dozen cooks stoked branched fires beneath iron cauldrons. The smell of onion stew and fresh-baked bread filled the air. Podrick Payne stood at her side, ladle in hand, and eyes bright with the thrill of battle. She accepted a steaming bowl, grateful for warmth and sustenance. Tomorrow, he murmured, we march to Harrenhal and face the Boltons. He studies her. Are you certain marching at dawn was wise? They may be expecting us. Brienne drank deeply of the broth. The stew was thin but nourishing. She placed her bowl aside and met his gaze. We move swiftly. The element of surprise favors us while the light is low and the mists still cling to the river's bends. Our scouts have reported Bolton patrols further upstream. They will not know we press directly on their stronghold until we stand before its gates. Demmed see. Podrick nodded but did not seem fully convinced. Brienne laid a hand on his shoulder. Have faith in our men, and in your queen's strategy. She paused, glancing at the frozen moat that ringed the castle's outer walls. I will need you at my side. I will not fail you, sir, he said, lips set. She offered him a small, rare smile. That I know. Stowing her bowl, Brienne strode from the kitchen, and climbed the rise to the open field where the host was arrayed. Dawn's first light painted the sky pale lavender, and a fog drifted across the broad lawns before the castle. The banners of House Stark, Arryn, and Tully, Wolf, Falcon, and Trout fluttered in uneasy alliance beside Cal's Sellsword pennons and the wild banners of the northern chiefs. At the head of the mass, Sansa Stark, wearing a simple cloak of black leather and brushed mail, sat astride a snow-white palfrey. Her auburn hair was bound back with slender silver clasps, shaped like direwolf heads. Around her, her small council stood: Lord Royce, Lady Lyanna Mormont, Brynden Tully, and Lord Manderley, each resolute, each prepared for what must come. Brienne took her place beside Sansa. "My queen," she said quietly, bowing her head. Sansa returned the gesture, eyes calm as the sea before a storm. "Good morning, Commander." Brienne inclined her head again. "The men await your command." Sansa turned in her saddle and faced the host. "Brave men of the north, loyal knights of the Vale, stout sons of the Riverlands, and honorable Sellswords, I stand before you not as one of nobility, but as one who owes everything to your courage. Today, we march to free Harrenhal from the Boltons who dare to claim kinship with traitors and tyrants. Today, we ride not for plunder or prize, but for justice and for the innocent women and children who suffer under their lash. Ride with me, and let the banners of the north fly free." Then a roar broke from the assembled host, a fierce, tremulous cry that echoed off the castle walls and rolled across the fields. Sansa raised her hand. Brienne felt the surge of power that comes when an army believes in its cause. The queen smiled, a small curve of steel and hope, and turned back to Brienne. "Shall we begin?" she asked. Brienne nodded. "At your command." Sansa drew her sword, a slender blade etched with wolf motifs. "Then, let us ride." With that, the host advanced. The ground beneath quaked with the tread of thousands of feet and hooves. Drums sounded from the northern vanguard, drums that beat like warhounds baying for blood. Horns answered from the Vale and the Riverlands. Brass and iron clashed in a tumult as shields were buckled and mail clasped. Brienne drew Oathkeeper, its blade glinting white in the dawn, and set her jaw. By her side, Podrick drew his sword with a soft ring. Captain Call's war axe sang from its scabbard. In the first clang of steel, Brienne felt every oath she had sworn. Oathkeeper's vow, her promise to Sansa, the trust of her queen's guard, all converge into one unbreakable purpose. They streamed out of the castle's gates, through the moat and across the broken bridge that spanned the river's fork. Here the pursuit slowed as the muddy banks claimed many hooves and feet. Brienne led the infantry, her Sellswords and Tully levies in the center, with the Knights of the Vale on the right flank and the heavy Northmen on the left. Rangers perched in light mail and staves slipped into the woods that bordered the fields, ready to harass flanks and protect the host from concealed ambush. A half-mile out, they came upon the Bolton patrols, 20 mounted men, red cloaks emblazoned with flayed man sigils. The Bolton men rode toward them, lances couched, their horses snorting. The Knights of the Vale thundered forward to meet them, and Brienne raised her voice, calling her Sellswords to form ranks. The Bolton patrol rode into the front lines and found themselves met with a wall of steel. Vale lances and northern swords crashed through the thin patrol, and in moments the Boltons were cut down or driven fleeing back toward their stronghold. Brienne urged her center onward, hearts pounding, breath ripping in her lungs, and the host spread out like a scythe across the farmland. By mid-morning, the mists had burned off, leaving soggy fields and scattered groves. Ahead, on an embankment overlooking the river, rose the immense bulk of Harrenhal's towers, pockmarked, half-ruined, yet imposing as ancient gods. Between its legs flowed the broad lake that lent the castle its name, its cold black waters reflecting the broken turrets. Brienne gripped her sword hilt. "Hold here," she called to her captains. "Let the flanks secure the woods. We will surround the keep, cut off their escape, and force them to yield or fight." From the tree line, rangers and sellswords emerged, closing the ring of steel. A dozen trebuchets, stolen from the twins, were unlimbered and set to hurl massive stones at the castle's walls. Archers, drawn from the Vale's ranks, climbed the embankment and took up positions in the cottages that dotted the shoreline. Their arrows loosed like rain upon the castle watchmen, forcing the Boltons to shelter behind battlements. Sansa rode to Brienne's side. "Your plan holds," she said. "Yet I must speak with Lord Brynden. He knows this place better than any." Brienne inclined her head. "I will hold the vanguard. Send your uncle." "No." Sansa rode off at a trot, her cloak trailing behind like a dark banner. Brienne turned to Captain Call. "You know their traditions. Offer them terms. Surrender the keep, hand over the Bolton leaders, and swear fealty to the Queen in the north, or they will be treated as outlaws, and the walls will be razed." He nodded, hefting his axe. "I will ride with Sir Piper. Let us deliver this message." The two took their small escort and trotted toward the castle gates, red dust swirling at their horses' hooves. Brienne watched them go, then turned to her men. "Prepare for the walls to come down. Oil, faggots, ladders, and siege hooks. The Bolton banners will not fly much longer." All through that morning, the engines of war creaked to life. By noon, the trebuchets were hurling boulders that made the towers shudder. The rangers raked the ramparts with arrows. Panicked defenders darted in and out of arrow slits. The Bolton standard, a great hide painted with black and red flayed men, still flew from the gatehouse, but its edges were torn and fluttered like so much rag. And then, heralded by the toll of bells, Captain Call returned, riding in haste. Brienne rode to intercept him, sword drawn but not threatening. "They refuse," he rasped, sweat and grime painting his face. "They will not yield. They call us usurpers and promise to hold the outer bailey until winter falls again." Brienne's chest tightened. She swallowed, forcing calm. "Then they will have no mercy." She turned to her captains. "Gather Andre of the Val's knights, the Umbers, and Lady Lyanna's men. We press the assault ourselves. I will lead the first wave. Prepare scaling ladders and grappling hooks." The captains nodded, stamping to attention. Brienne looked northward, where the pale sun glinted cold on Harrenhal's towers. "Men of the Queen in the north. Today we break this seat of traitors. Today we teach the Boltons that mercy is earned, not demanded." She spurred her horse forward, the edge of her horse's hoof striking sparks on the rocky ground. The knights of the Vale followed, their white cloaks billowing. Behind them, the Sellswords and Northmen formed shield walls beneath the battered walls of Harrenhal. Brienne leapt from her mount and charged at the foot of the walls, her sword singing its oath, her heart pounding like a war drum. Shouts rose as men hefted ladders, braced shields, and heaved grappling hooks over the battlements. Bolton crossbowmen let fly their quarrels. Bolts hissed and found shields, or drove men screaming to the ground. Brienne met the first onslaught, parrying a bolt that slammed into her shield with a tremor that jolted her arm. She called out, voice ringing, "Hold steady! Push the ladders!" Men heaved the ladders against the wall. Brienne climbed one of the wooden rungs, her mailed boots biting into the wood. At the top, she vaulted onto the crushed stones and drew her sword. A Bolton guard rushed her, axe swinging. She sidestepped, bringing Oathkeeper down in a clean arc that sheared through armor and bone. The man crumpled, and Brienne leapt down, landing hard but steady. Below, the battle raged. Sellswords clashed with Bolton men-at-arms, trusting their steel more than the mud-soaked fields. Northmen hefted great hammers to batter gate doors. Vale knights wheeled around the outer bailey, charging through breaches where the stone had been shattered. Everywhere the tide turned in their favor. Walls crumbled, gates splintered, and Bolton banners were rent and trampled. On the embankment, the trebuchets made final shots, battering the wall beside the gatehouse until the huge stones collapsed inward, filling a section of the moat with rubble. Brienne raced toward the breach and saw men staggering across the debris. She followed, calling to the Umbers as they crossed, axes cleaving through wooden beams and wrought iron portcullis. As the breach widened, Bolton defenders retreated deeper into the keep, their cries of defiance fading behind wooden doors. Brienne paused at the broken portcullis, breathing hard. sweat and cold mixing in rivulets down her neck. Beneath her armor, her heart pounded with triumph and sorrow. Triumph that the Boltons would no longer tyrannize the innocent, sorrow for the blood that had to be spilled to secure justice. She raised her sword. Forward, follow me into the heart of Harrenhal. Men surged across the breach. Brienne led the way down the rubble-strewn hallways, torches flickering in blackened sconces, the smell of smoke thick in the air. Bolton knights formed a desperate defense in a wide gallery. Halberds raised. Brienne charged, her blade carving a path. Men-at-arms slamming into the Boltons' flanks. Sellswords fought with savage skill, shouting war cries that echoed through the ruined halls. Within moments, the defenders lay dead or wounded, their bodies strewn like broken statues. At the far end of the gallery, a heavy door barred the way. Brienne strode forward, wiping her blade on a fallen Bolton cloak. She could hear voices behind the door, the muffled commands of Bolton lords, the fear and anger of men who had once held power here. She pushed the door open with her shield and stepped through into the keep's great solar, a cavernous chamber of shattered columns and crumbling banners. There, surrounded by half a dozen armored knights, stood Roose Bolton and his son Ramsay, the latter's eyes glittering with cruel amusement. Roose Bolton, pale as death itself, looked down at Brienne with a calm that chilled her more than Ramsay's grin. "Sir Brienne of Tarth," he said, voice measured. "We meet at last." She met his gaze. "You stand accused of treason and tyranny, my lord. Surrender yourself, and your men shall be spared. Resist, and you will face justice by the blade." Ramsay laughed, a hateful bark that echoed in the hollow hall. "Justice from a bastard girl sits on soft straw in Winterfell, while he spat on the floor. "I have fought and bled in these lands. I know the North better than your queen ever will." Nendar. Roose laid a hand on his son's arm. "It is over, Ramsay. The gates are ours. The people of the Riverlands have seen our cruelty. They will not follow you." Ramsay's eyes blazed. "Kill them all," he spat. "Let Harrenhal burn with every raven in the sky." Brienne felt a sudden fury rise within her. "Ramsay Bolton," she said, voice cold as steel. "You have murdered the innocent, hunted women and children like wolves pursue lambs. You have no honor left to shame." She raised Oathkeeper. "Face me now, and end this." Ramsay drew his sword, a cruel blade with saw-toothed edges. Gladly. They met at the center of the hall. Ramsay struck first, a flurry of vicious cuts. Brienne parried, every blow ringing up her arm. She countered with a swift slash to his thigh, drawing blood. He staggered back, snarling. Brienne pressed her advantage, driving him across fallen columns. Ramsay lunged blindly. She sidestepped and brought the flat of her blade across his chest. He fell, coughing, and reached for his dagger. Roose Bolton raised his crossbow, but Brienne's keen eye caught the movement. She kicked aside Ramsay's dagger and lunged, Oathkeeper finding its mark at Roose's heart. He staggered, eyes wide, then collapsed beside his son. Ramsay spat blood and tried to rise, but Brienne knelt, pressing her boot to his chest. "It ends," she said, "never to rise again." Ramsay's laugh was a gurgle. "You think this is justice? You know nothing?" Brienne pressed harder. His face went pale, then slack. She released her boot and he lay still. Silence fell in the shattered solar. Brienne rose, wiping her blade. Around her, men of the North and the Vale crossed the threshold, eyes wide at the sight of Ramsay's broken body and his father's still form. Brienne stood amid the ruin, Oathkeeper held high. "Harrenhal is ours," she announced. "Let no Bolton remain." A cheer rose that shook stone and dust. Men clashed shields, shouting. Brienne turned to one of her captains. "Find Sansa. Tell her the keep is taken. Send word to River Run and Winterfell. The Boltons are no more." The captain nodded and rushed away. Brienne walked the halls of Harrenhal, stepping over fallen banners and wounded men. At the outer gatehouse, she found Lady Lyanna Mormont and Sir Mark Piper issuing orders to secure the grounds and treat the wounded. She laid a hand on Lady Lyanna's shoulder. "Your courage has been a beacon," Brienne said quietly. Lyanna, scarred and fierce, nodded. "The Boltons broke my heart. Today, we mend it." Brienne offered her a respectful bow. "The North will not forget." Beyond the walls, the sun dipped low. Setting the shattered towers aflame in golden light. Brienne gazed at the ruined fortress, once a symbol of fear, now reclaimed by justice. She thought of Sansa, of how far they had come, from frostbound councils in Winterfell to the heart of Bolton power. And she thought of what came next. Rebuilding, healing, forging a new order in the wake of war. As the flagstones cooled, Brienne mounted her horse. The day's triumph was tempered by the cost in blood. But the Boltons' reign of terror was ended. She raised her visor, letting the evening breeze caress her face. Beyond the lake, across the dark water, the banners of the North flew free. In the distance, she could hear the distant horns of River Run's garrison, welcoming the news. She urged her mount forward, riding through the broken gates and into the dusk. The host followed, banners rippling, the promise of peace and justice alive on every wind. In her heart, Brienne bore the weight of her oath still. An oath to serve, to protect, to uphold the Queen's justice. And she would carry that vow, as long as life remained in her veins. For Sansa Stark, for Winterfell, for the North reborn, and for the fragile hope that rises, strongest of all, when the darkness has been driven back by the steel of the just, and the courage of those who wield it. Brienne rode through Harrenhal's shattered gatehouse as dusk settled into a chilled velvet sky. The host followed in her wake, banners limp from battle but unbowed, their sigils muddy and frayed. Around her, the faint glow of torchlight revealed columns half-toppled by trebuchet and time, great halls gutted by fire and steel. Yet the people, soldiers of the North, knights of the Vale, Riverlanders, Rangers, Sellswords, all rode with high heads and steady hearts, for the Boltons lay dead in their own stronghold, and the black iron throne of Harrenhal had fallen silent. At the courtyard's center, Brienne dismounted. She drew Oathkeeper, its white steel humming in the cool air, and looked to the ranks before her. From beneath her helm, her dark hair lay smoothed but stained with ash. She felt every muscle ache, every sinew tremble with the day's fervor. Yet within her chest, a fire still burned, an oath renewed, a duty unfulfilled. "Men and women of the Queen in the North," she called, voice ringing true across the silent stones. "Today, you have struck down tyranny and freed a land long shackled by cruelty. You have shown that honor still holds strength enough to pierce the darkest hearts. Ride with me to the inner keep. Let us lay the Boltons' heads beneath Sansa Stark's feet, as proof that justice endures." "Bah!" A roar answered her, reverberating off ruined walls. Torches bobbed, steel gleamed, and within every eye she saw the same fierce conviction. They would see this done. Guiding her horse through the rubble, Brienne led the way to the inner curtain wall, where the true power of Harrenhal had once been exercised. The doors hung from rusted hinges. Iron grates lay crushed on the ground. She pressed forward, her boots clattering over fallen masonry, until she reached the heart of the castle, the great hall, where banners of the Boltons still hung like funeral shrouds. Within that grand chamber, Brienne halted. Flickering torches lined the walls, casting dancing shadows. At the dais stood the ornamental seats where Roose Bolton had once lorded over the Riverlands. She ascended the broken steps and laid Oathkeeper across the highest chair. "By this blade, I declare the House of Bolton forfeit. Their lands and titles shall be turned to those who have suffered under their cruelty. Let no Bolton cross these halls again." Below, her captains knelt, and the Sellswords bowed their heads. A hush fell, reverent, and solemn. From the back of the hall, a soft rustle stirred. Brienne turned to see a small figure stepping forward. Arya Stark, dagger in hand, cloak drawn tight against the chill. Her face bore the fresh traumas of her own journey, eyes hard as winter ice but flickering with kinship. "Brienne," Arya said, voice low yet clear. "I have come to see justice done." She sheathed needle and knelt before the dais. "I ask leave to claim justice for my house." Brienne studied Arya, recalling the girl who had once called her Brienne, the Beauty. No longer a child, Arya now stood as a warrior, her losses as many as her strengths. Brienne knelt, oathkeeper in hand, and placed it in Arya's grasp. "Then take this blade, Arya Stark, and cast down any remnant of Bolton blood you find. Let no crime go unpunished." Arya lifted the sword, eyes glinting. "Thank you." She rose, turned, and strode from the hall, purposeful as a shadow. Brienne watched her go, then rose and descended the dais. Outside, the fires of victory crackled in oil lamps. Beyond the gate, she heard laughter and song, soldiers sharing wine, embracing old friends, mourning the dead. Though the night was young, Brienne sensed the turning point had been reached. From here, the path led to rebuilding, to healing, and to the final march on King's Landing. Behind her, footsteps echoed. Sansa emerged, clad in simple riding leathers, and a cloak clasped with the direwolf brooch. Her face was pale but unbroken, her hair brushed free of the day's grime. "You led them true," Sansa said, voice gentle. She placed a hand on Brienne's shoulder. "Harrenhal is free." Brienne bowed her head. "By your grace and by the courage of these souls. The North stands because you gave us purpose." Sansa's eyes shone. "Tonight, we honor the fallen. Dawn will see us on the road south." She lifted her chin. "But for now, stand with me as a knight, and as my friend." Brienne straightened. "My queen, always." Together, they walked through the broken archway into the courtyard, where flames illuminated rough tables bearing bread, cheese, and flagons of ale. Brienne took a cup, touching it to Sansa's before drinking. "To Winterfell," Sansa toasted. "To Sansa Stark," Brienne echoed. Around them, voices lifted in song, ancient northern chants of home and hearth. The firelight rippled across their faces as the two stood among warriors, together at the center of a world remade by steel and oath. And so, beneath Harrenhal's ruined towers, Brienne of Tarth, commander of the Queen's Guard, began the next chapter of her vow: to ride south, to rally allies, and to see Sansa Stark crowned queen of all Westeros. The road ahead would be long, the battles yet to come fierce, but they rode with justice as their shield and hope as their lodestar. Night deepened, the chorus of soldiers lulled by ale and triumph. High above, the moon rose full and cold. Brienne looked skyward, hand on Oathkeeper's hilt, and swore once more. So long as her blood ran warm, she would stand as sword and shield for the Queen in the north, and for the fragile dream of peace she had helped forge. Oh. The gray dawn found Brienne and Sansa riding at the head of the assembled host as they broke camp before Harrenhal. The keep, scarred and silent now, lay behind them like a testament to justice wrought in steel and blood. Under Sansa's banner, a coalition of Northmen, Vale Knights, Riverlanders, Sellswards bound by oath, and even a contingent of Night's Watch Rangers moved southward along the King's Road. Their destination, King's Landing, and the final reckoning with the Lannister forces that still held the Iron Throne. From the moment Harrenhal fell, tidings had flown ahead on raven wings. The Boltons were no more, the North and its allies stood united, and Sansa Stark claimed her birthright, not only as queen in the North, but as a challenger to Cersei Lannister's reign. Each castle passed. Seaguard, Fairmarket, Stony Sept, sent envoys bearing fealty, or in some cases, reluctant pledges of neutrality. Brienne oversaw every parley, her presence a living guarantee that Sansa's promises of safe conduct and just rule were no idle words. The road through the Riverlands. At Fairmarket, Brynden Tully led his troops from the river fortress to meet them. Lady Hyle, the elderly steward, bore tearful tribute of fish and wine. Brienne shared a private word with Brynden as they rode side by side beneath the rustling banners. "Your people have suffered much," Brienne said, voice low. "May this campaign bring them peace." Brynden inclined his head. "They will fight for Lady Stark, and for the Riverland's green shores." "But the Lannisters still hold the twins. Lord Frey will demand payment if we press him." Brienne nodded. "We will cross elsewhere if need be." She wheeled her horse to inspect the Sellsword guards, ensuring they treated Fairmarket's townsfolk with dignity. Even in war, she reminded them, mercy must temper victory. Rallying at Seaguard. 2 days later, the host reached Seaguard. Sir Desmond Mallister, a lean knight in dented plate, greeted Sansa with sword in hand. His banner, a coiled eel on silver, flew over the castle walls. He offered his fortress without condition, but Brienne insisted on formal oaths. As Sansa spoke words of hope and renewal in the courtyard, Brienne watched from the raised gallery. A dozen knights knelt before the queen. Sellswords bore witness. When the last pledge was sworn, Brienne released a suppressed breath. Their numbers swelled. Supplies grew more abundant. That night, under lantern glow, Brienne and her captains held council in the castle's war tent. Maps of the western passes lay spread on a low oak table. From the south came word that Casterly Rock's mines were nearly exhausted, that gold shipments had slowed, and that Cersei's armies were thin along the western coast. "We strike at the Lannisters when they least expect it," Brienne advised. "A direct assault on King's Landing is possible, but we must first cut their supply lines in the Westerlands and secure the Golden Tooth." Lord Gawain Serret, captain of Seaguard's garrison, tapped the map. "The Golden Tooth lies astride the Mander River. If we secure it, Lannister columns from the west will falter." Sansa considered. "Then we send a division under Sir Gawain and Captain Coll to take the pass in a swift raid, while the main host presses on King's Landing." Brienne approved. "They will have my orders and my steel if needed." The Golden Tooth. A week's ride west through rolling hills brought them to the foot of the pass. At dawn, Cal's Sellswords and Sir Gawain's knights stormed the outer guard towers in lightning strikes. Brienne stood on a rocky spur above them, heralding the charge with Oathkeeper raised high. The Lannister garrison, caught unprepared, surrendered before the sun had fully risen. The loot of the rich castle filled their pouches, but Brienne redirected it all to feed the refugees of the Westerlands. A fortnight later, with the Golden Tooth secure, the host regrouped at Kurt's farms beside the Mander. Sansa oversaw the redistribution of grain to starving villages. Brienne supervised the medical tents where maesters and healers tended the wounded. The march on King's Landing. As spring pressed into summer, the host advanced southward. The King's Road, once the avenue of Lannister triumph, now bore the banners of House Stark, Tully, Arryn, and Tarth. Towns and villages struck their gates open at the sight. Dray carts laden with provisions, smithies hammering steel to forge new pikes, farriers shoeing horses to replace those lost at Harrenhal. Each farmer who joined added strength. Each family freed from Lannister extortion added resolve. Sansa traveled in a gilded litter behind her mounted guard. Brienne rode beside it, vigilant. Lettered ravens darted overhead, carrying messages. From Highgarden came the pledge of the Tyrell heir, who had recognized Sansa's cause. From Dorne came cautious blessings. From the free cities, Sellsword companies sought deeds to earn their pay. It was a coalition unprecedented in the Seven Kingdoms. Ambush at the Red Fork. On the eve of King's Landing, near the Red Fork, Tywin Lannister's forces, veteran men-at-arms in elite gold cloaks, lay in wait. Brienne's scouts warned of the trap. A narrow bridge, arching over a swollen river, flanked by steep ridges. Lannister banners gleamed in the dusk. The smell of smoke hung in the air. Brienne convened her captains beneath an old willow. "They seek to break our vanguard," she said. "We will bait their charge." She pointed to 3 squads of Sellswords hidden along the riverbank in the reeds, and a reserve of Vale Knights under Sir Lyn Arryn placed covertly on higher ground. Brienne herself would lead Sansa's personal guard across the bridge to draw their main force. Then, at the signal horn, the ambush would spring. Sansa rode up, her face set. "I ride with you." Brienne hesitated, then nodded. 8 signal horn, back away swiftly. You will be the lure. As candles flickered low along the ridge, Sansa crossed first with her guard. Brienne followed behind, sword unsheathed. The Lannister commander, Sir Willem Crickehall, rode out to meet them, trumpets blaring. Yield for mercy, Brienne called, voice carrying. Your king commands you stand down. Crickehall laughed. Your king is dead. The usurper needs no parley. He charged, lance couched. Brienne met him, and they clashed with the ring of steel. Spears shattered. Horses reared. At that instant, blows thundered from the north bank. Sel's-word sprang forth, slinging bolts and pistols. Drums sounded across the ridge. Vale knights thundered down. From the flank, arrows fell like rain upon the Lannister infantry. Amid the chaos, Brienne disengaged, signaling Sansa to wheel away. The queen steered her litter back toward the main host as the ambush exploded. Lannister soldiers reeling in the marshy riverbank found themselves ensnared by hidden pikes. Those who tried to flee up the ridges were cut down by reappearing knights. In less than an hour, the trap was sprung, and the Lannister vanguard lay broken before the gates. With the Red Fork behind them, the host pressed on. When the walls of King's Landing came into sight, towering gray stone crowned by the red flag of the Lions, the air felt taut, as if bated breath had settled over the city. Brienne led the advanced guard through the outer suburbs, blackened ruins of burned warehouses, soldiers of the crown still looting the wreckage, dozen victual carts overturned in makeshift barricades. Sansa rode at the front of her litter, pale but unbowed. The host arrayed in the wide expanse beyond Blackwater Rush. To the east lay the Dragon Pit. To the west, the battlements overlooking King's Gate. In between, the city's 1,000 roofs rose like a sea of slate. Brienne dismounted. We have them between river and wall, she said. They cannot sally without crossing water, nor flee without passing our lines. She pointed to the broken chain boom, the remnant of Stannis' blockade, and to the makeshift pontoon bridges Sansa had ordered built. Wide causeways of felled trees and boats lashed together. When Sansa spoke on the field, her voice carried like trumpets. Cersei Lannister, I, Sansa Stark, rightful heir of Winterfell and queen in the north, lay claim to the Iron Throne. Yield now or face justice. Let no innocent suffer for their crimes, and none shall be harmed. Silence answered. From the Red Keep's walls, flags fluttered. In the Dragon Pit, the dragon skulls brooded. Then, a lone trumpeter sounded, Cersei's signal, and from the city came the rumble of drums, answered by the roll of massive warhammers against the city gates. Ziga and intrigue. The siege of King's Landing lasted nearly a fortnight. Brienne oversaw the council of war beneath Sansa's tent each dawn. Tyrion Lannister, now in exile in Sansa's service, offered counsel from the shadows. Where to place siege engines, how to exploit the city's weaknesses, and which noble families might be bribed or threatened into surrender. The Tyrell heir sent reinforcements through Blackwater Bay, and the ships of Lord Valerian blockaded the harbor, cutting off supplies. Within the city, tunnels were begun by rangers skilled in mining. Trebuchets hurled stones that shattered walls. Siege ladders propped against battlements. All the while, Sansa parleyed with gold-cloaked captains and septons, offering safe exit to small folk and pardon to those who laid down arms. Brienne rode the lines daily, checking on the wounded, delivering ravens to the maesters, and ensuring no cruelty befell. Surrendering soldiers. On the 10th day, Tywin Lannister himself, elder, gaunt, maddened by pride, rode out to meet Sansa Tarth. He demanded a parley beneath the walls. Sansa and Brienne went forward under a white pennon. Tywin offered to abdicate in favor of his daughter. Cersei would remain queen regent, and to yield the city if assured that House Lannister would retain its lands in the Westerlands. Sansa considered, then signaled Brienne. We accept on 2 conditions, she said. The Lannisters would relinquish all their hostages, surrender every tower of the Red Keep, and send Cersei to the Eyrie for trial. Tywin balked at the latter, But Brienne's steely gaze and oathkeeper at rest on her shoulder spoke of the price of refusal. At length, Tywin bowed. So be it. He signed terms on a scroll beneath the wall's shadow. The fall of the lioness. On the dawn of the final day, the gates of King's Landing open. Sansa rode in first, cloaked in white and silver, flanked by Brienne and Tyrion. The streets, once thronged with Lannister banners, now bore the wolf standard. Citizens roared their approval. No more taxes, no more fear, no more tyranny. Brienne led the Queen's Guard through the narrow avenues to the Red Keep. Along the way, she halted roving gold cloaks, who eyed the Queen's triumph as a chance for plunder. With a word and the promise of swift justice, she restored order. Each step toward the throne room pressed her closer to destiny's weight. In the throne room, Sansa ascended the Iron Throne, its sharp edges softened by the silver cloak draped across it, while Tywin knelt, head bowed. Brienne stood guard at Sansa's side. When Cersei was brought forth in chains, Sansa spoke her sentence: exile to the Eyrie, stripped of power, but safe from execution. Cersei's crimson hair fell across her shoulders, humiliation in her green eyes. She glared once at Sansa, then at Brienne. "You know nothing of mercy," she spat. Brienne's reply was a quiet, unwavering vow. "I know only justice." A queen crowned. That evening, a coronation unlike any the Seven Kingdoms had seen unfolded under the sunset-lit sky of King's Landing. As Sansa Stark wore the crown of the Seven Kingdoms, a circlet wrought of white gold and carved direwolves, Brienne knelt before her, oathkeeper laid across her upturned palms. "Rise, Sir Brienne of Tarth," Sansa proclaimed, "Knight Commander of the Queen's Guard of the Seven Kingdoms. By this oath, I bind you to watch over the realm and its people, as you have watched over me." And Brienne rose, tears catching the torchlight. Around her, the united host, North, Vale, Riverlands, Westerlands, even a contingent from Dorne, cheered with one voice. The old rivalries were fading in that moment of new beginning. Epilogue: Peace in a broken land. In the months that followed, Sansa Stark ruled from the Red Keep, with justice and wisdom. Brienne's name became legend. The knight who never broke her oath, who served a queen she loved, who forged peace where there had been only war. The realm healed in stages. Lannisport's mines opened once more under fair taxation. The Riverlands fields were replanted. Trade resumed in King's Landing's docks. The wall was renewed by Night's Watch and Northern engineers. Brienne remained at Sansa's side, her presence a living bulwark against corruption. She trained new Queen's Guard recruits in the yard beneath the throne room, passing on the discipline and honor she had learned across a lifetime of service. Podrick Payne rose to become her squire's master, teaching young knights to wield sword and shield with compassion. And in the quiet moments, when the Iron Throne's shadow stretched long across the Red Keep, Brienne would stand on the parapets, looking west toward the sunset, and remember the oath she swore at Winterfell, that day she first donned the scabbard at Sansa's feet. Her vow remained as sharp as Oathkeeper's blade: to protect the Queen, to uphold justice, and to preserve the fragile hope she and Sansa had kindled from the ashes of war. In a world built anew, that hope would endure so long as Brienne of Tarth rode as its steadfast guardian. Brienne rode at dawn's first light, the chill of morning dew still clinging to her cloak, as King's Landing's skyline receded behind her. Beside her, Podrick Payne steered his mare with the careful attention of a knight, though his cheeks still bore the warmth of youth. The Queen's litter clattered on sturdy wheels 2 ranks behind, its bearers asleep now that the city's tumult had quieted. In the distance, Sansa Stark's silver circlet caught the rising sun as she stood to greet the day, her cloak of white wolf fur draped like a banner of peace. Their destination lay northward, the Riverlands, where Brynden Tully's duties to restore broken bridges and scatter grain to the peasantry still demanded attention. Beyond that, the Frostfangs beckoned. Word had come that beyond the wall, an uneasy truce prevailed between the Night's Watch and the Free Folk, but rumors swirled of iceberg ships. But rumors swirled of iceberg ships stranded on the shivering sea. The realm's healing was far from complete, and the Queen's Guard, led by Brienne of Tarth, braced for service both martial and merciful. They crossed the Mander at first light's violet glow, the pontoon bridges still sound beneath hoof and foot. Maesters and ravens flitted about, bearing Sansa's missives. To Winterfell, to Highgarden, to Sunspear. Her rule extended further than a crown could signify. She governed hearts and hearts governed men. When the host assembled at Grover's Crossing, Ser Brienne dismounted and gathered her captains beneath a white banner stitched with deerwolves. Today we aid Brynden Tully in rebuilding Riverrun's northern fords, she said, voice low yet carrying. We will see that no child goes hungry and no widow begs at castle gates. The Queen's justice is not only for the battlefield. Lyanna Mormont, perched on her mare like a bear cub enthroned, spat into the stream. I will see to the winter stores, she promised. My men will haul the logs and mend the levees. No flood shall choke this land again. Sir Lyn Arryn's gauntleted fist pounded his chest. And the Vale's knights will raise towers for watch and ward, to guard scholars and merchants alike. Brienne nodded. Podrick leaned forward. I will inspect the villages, he said, and see that the Maester's chains and the Septon's altars are rebuilt. Thus divided, the host spread across the Weald. Brigades dispatched to fallen bridges, ruined mills, beached river barges. Brienne herself led a detachment to the broken crossing at Whitwater, whose stone arches had collapsed in the last storm. Along the banks, farmers stood in straw-strewn fields, faces creased with relief and uncertainty. Brienne knelt to greet them, Oathkeeper at her side like a silent sentinel. Good folk, she said, voice gentle. Your queen sends aid. Stone and timber, grain and coin. We will rebuild your bridge. Stronger than before. A gray-haired villager raised a gnarled hand. And the Boltons? Will they never darken our door again? Brienne's gaze hardened. They have been judged. Their heirs are no threat. Now we face winter's cold, and the wildlands beyond. But here, in the Queen's North, none shall harm you. Oh. As work began, stonemasons hewing blocks, carpenters fitting beams. Brienne watched the men and women laugh and argue. Children chase geese. A widow stirs soup in a black kettle. She had borne witness to horror and cruelty. Now she beheld renewal. In that moment, Oathkeeper felt almost too bright to sheath. By nightfall, the crossing stood half remade. Scaffolding braced the arches, carts rattled across planks newly laid, and torchlight shone in cottages unlooted and restored. Brienne rode the length of the bridge, inspecting each joint, each fastening. She found a fault, a beam misaligned, and with her own gauntlet tightened a brace. Podrick watched, eyes wide. Sir Brienne, he said softly, you do everything with care. She paused. It is not just steel that holds a realm together, Podrick. It is each small act of diligence. A repaired bridge spares a merchant's livelihood. A shared loaf saves a child's life. A vow kept in peace is no less vital than one kept in war. He nodded, understanding in his gaze. Behind them, the murmured voices of villagers rose in prayer to the Seven and the old gods. Gratitude poured out in candle flames and trembling song. When Brienne turned to leave, the flicker of hope in their eyes struck her more deeply than any battle's triumph. 2 weeks later, the host reassembled at Riverrun for their next march. North to the Neck, where green's ears in the swamps whispered of writhing shapes beneath black water, and of a growing darkness that even the wall's watchfires could not hold at bay. The path wound through groves of alder and willow, through choking mists where legends told of ghosts that lured travelers to drown beneath the bog. Scouts returned with trembling reports. Travelers lost. Beasts returned deformed. Sansa Stark, though queen of the realm, pressed her lips in a thin line. No throne beneath her would perch so high as to ignore the perils of the lowlands. Brienne called her captains to council beneath the great weirwood in Riverrun's Godswood, its bark stained red by centuries of sacrifice. We cannot simply ride through the neck, she said, voice echoing among moss-draped limbs. We must secure safe passage for merchants, for ravens, for refugees fleeing the northern wilds. This land is as much part of our realm as the mountains of the Vale or the sands of Dorne. We bring law where there was none. Captain Call hefted his axe. My sellswords can clear the ridges. Give us targets, and we will fell bandit lords and wild men alike. Lady Lyanna scowled. We need guides. The Crannogmen know these marshes. We'll ride with those who call the bog home, or risk losing our horses to hidden pits. Memento. Sansa raised a hand. Then we ride at dawn. Scouts with Crannog spears. Sellswords with tridents and nets. Rangers with bows. And knights to hold the rear. We press through daylight hours, light every causeway, post watchfires along the pass. Brienne inclined her head. 8 each waypoint. We leave a garrison of 40 men. Enough to hold the crossing. Enough to offer refuge. She passed a scroll to Podrick. Send ravens to Winterfell. Ask for the northern reavers, whose longships can patrol the bay. Their presence will deter invaders from the marshes. New end. He accepted the scroll, bowing. 8 once. The dawn's mist clung to horse and rider as they entered the neck. Crannogmen emerged from fog like phantoms, slim figures in peat-brown cloaks, carrying spears with iron heads and nets woven from rushes. They guided the host along raised causeways of woven branch, across black water that lapped at their boots. The air tasted of rot and bog gas. The cries of heron and bittern echoed through the reeds. Brienne rode beside Sansa, whose eyes never faltered. Stay close, Sansa warned, pointing to willow-haunted hollows. Ambushes come swiftly here. Brienne signaled the scouts, and Crannog tridents slid into hidden tunnels in the marsh. At mid-morning they struck. Bandit raiders emerged from alder copses, axes raised, voices screaming curses. The host shattered in an instant. Vale knights crushed the vanguard. Sellswords waded through knee-high water to cut off escape. Rangers loosed a volley from the reeds. Within minutes, the bog stank of blood and panic. The raiders fled or fell. When the clearing fell silent, Brienne rode through the aftermath. A young Crannogman knelt by a fallen knight. Brienne dismounted to help bind his wound. The boy's eyes were wide. "Thank you, sir," he whispered. She offered a rare smile. "Your spear found its mark." He nodded, pride in his gaze. "My people will share your tale." In that damp clearing, Brienne saw the faces of the realm's true guardians, not only knights and sellswords, but Crannogmen, riverlords, fishermen, all bound by that same fragile hope. At dusk, they reached Moat Cailin, the ancient fortress sagging on its earthen mounds. Its gates were open, a rare sight. Garrisoned by a handful of Night's Watch rangers and northern spearmen. In the wide moat, wooden palisades braced the causeway. Atop the walls, a handful of archers scanned the marsh for dark shapes. Brienne rode forward. "We claim this hold for the Queen," she declared. "Leave a guard here of 50 men. 5 rangers, 5 sellswords, 40 northern veterans, and we march north." The Lord Commander of the Watch, a lean man named Harwin Poole, saluted. "Thank you, sir. We have held this place with few men. Your reinforcements will save many lives." "And no." Sansa dismounted, smiling for the first time that day. "Then this shall be your levy. Make it your home, your vigil. You answer to me and to the Night's Watch." They rode on at first light, the host thinned by detachments, but no less determined. Northward now, beyond Moat Cailin lay the last of the wildings, the lands of summer ice. From there, the Shadow Tower awaited. And then, perhaps, the wall itself. A new era beckoned, not conquest, but stewardship. As they left, the next crumbling ramparts behind, Brienne paused to tighten her gauntlets. Podrick cantered up, face bright with anticipation. "The Frostfangs come into view, sir," he said, pointing. Smoke curled above jagged peaks in the distance. Hunters' fires, or perhaps the faint prism of ice smoke from smashed glaciers. Brienne exhaled, steeling herself. "Here lies the final test," she said. "Not of arms alone, but of heart. We go to the edge of the world to uphold our vow." Sansa halted her litter at Brienne's side. "We do not ride as conquerors," she said softly. "We ride as bearers of hope." Brienne bowed her head. "Then let us be worthy of that hope." Under the silver dawn, Queen and Commander, they set their faces toward the horizon where land met ice, where the sky bled pink over untamed wilderness. And so, in the long shadow of the Frostfangs, Brienne of Tarth rode ever onward, sword at her side, oath in her heart, hope guiding her steps into the unmapped reaches of the north. "Okay. Oh." Brienne guided the column into the rising mists of the Frostfangs, each mount's hoofbeats muffled on the sodden earth. The narrow path wound between jagged outcrops of black stone and drifts of permafrost, the sky a low leaden dome overhead. Sansa's litter creaked behind her guard. The sellswords and crannogmen flanked the host, their lanterns swaying ghost-like among the pines. No birds sang here, only the wind's distant howl and the shriek of ice against rock. As daylight broke, they halted beside a frozen stream. Brienne dismounted and knelt, pressing her gauntlet to the ice. Beneath, water still ran, a current of life trapped beneath winter's grip. She glanced at Sansa, who watched from her litter with curious eyes. "These streams feed the shivering sea," Brienne said. "They carry stories of old, of giants and ice serpents, of long-buried magic." She turned to her captains. "We make camp here. Scouts, throw outposts 2 miles in every direction. Crannogmen, mark safe water crossings. Rangers, lay snares for game." From the ranks, Lady Lyanna Mormont swaggered forward. "I'll have my bear cubs guard the flanks. No beast or brigand will take us by surprise." Captain Cowell unsheathed his axe. "And my sellswords will clear the old ruins east of the stream. Romance of steel and stone, my kind of history." Brienne inclined her head. "Do so. I will see to the Queen's camp." The camp rose like a village of furs and canvas in the hollow. Fires smoked in iron cauldrons. Maesters brewed herbal teas against chill. Crannog women wove rush mats to insulate tents. Brienne oversaw the guard rotations, sending Podrick to the Ravens with messages. Word to Winterfell of their progress. Requests for reinforcements to the Shadow Tower, and a plea for Maester Luwin's counsel on the plague striking crows. Sansa emerged from her litter, brushing pine needles from her cloak. Despite the cold, her cheeks glowed with purpose. "Brienne," she called, voice firm. "I wish to walk the camp." She stepped down and wrapped herself in a heavy cloak, handed her by Lyanna. "I must see our people, to feel their strength." Brienne fell into step beside her. "They look to you for hope, my queen. You give it freely." Sansa paused at the edge of a fire where sellswords exchanged talismans with crannogmen, pearl-carved fish for iron-forged arrows. She knelt, trading a silver direwolf brooch for a rush-woven ring. "A promise," the Crannog man explained, "that the North remembers." Sansa pressed the ring to her lips. "I remember." Straightening, she turned to Brienne. "Tell me of the plague on the Ravens. Is it true we lose messages north and south?" Brienne nodded gravely. "Maester Luwin fears a contagion in the rookery, crows falling silent, brooding dead. If it spreads, our lines of communication collapse." She laid a hand on Sansa's arm. "I will go to the Shadow Tower myself if need be, to secure fresh ravens." Sansa's eyes shone. "Do so. I cannot risk being cut off now." Brienne inclined her head. "Ate once." That afternoon, Brienne rode north with a dozen riders, rangers skilled in cold-weather riding, 3 sellsword veterans in wolf furs, and Podrick carrying fresh ravens robed in oiled leather. The path climbed through tangled alder and lichen, each bend deeper in frost. At dusk, they reached the Shadow Tower's front gate, a circle of black wood palisades crowned with great axes. Lord Commander Edric Locke greeted them, his face gaunt but eyes bright. Behind him, ravens wheeled in flocks, their cages lined with cedar chips and herbs. "Sir Brienne," he said, voice echoing off ice, "we have lost half our birds. Those that live are weak." He led them inside to a chamber lined with cages, where ravens huddled silent. The plague spread south with every flight. Brienne knelt beside a cage. A crow's eye, milky yet dim, stared back. She swallowed. "We must replace them. Gather me every healthy rook in the Frostfangs and the foothills. Offer grain to wild flocks. Bring them here alive." Locke's jaw clenched. "It will take time." He hesitated, then added, "Also, wildlings come seeking peace. They say their shaman can cure the birds." Brienne looked up. "Arrange a parley. I will judge their cure by the crow's healing and the shaman's trust." Then, 2 days later, Brienne returned to camp with fresh ravens and 2 wildling emissaries. A grizzled shield maiden and her shaman, a lean man bent by age and visions. In the Godswood's clearing, they placed crows beneath a weirwood's boughs. The shaman murmured an incantation in a tongue older than the wall. One by one the ravens stirred, feathers fluffing, their black eyes brightening. The camp watched in awed silence. When the last bird cawed, Brienne bowed. "You have saved our voices," she told the shaman. "What price do you ask?" He raised a gnarled hand. "Safe passage south for my people. A place in Sansa's realm where they may live without fear." Brienne met his gaze. "I pledge it." Then she turned to the camp. "Prepare to receive the free folk among us. They shall have feast and shelter until winter's end." That night, as firelight danced on the weirwood's face, the free folk joined the feast, their songs low as the sea's undertow, their toasts rough with moral ale. Sansa rose and spoke words of welcome. Brienne stood at her side, Oathkeeper laid across her upturned palms. In that circle of torches, stark bannermen, Vale Knights, Riverlanders, Cranagmen, Sellswards, Night's Watch, and now wildlings united, Brienne saw the future of a realm welded by trust, not fear. When the revels waned, Brienne and Sansa walked beneath the pines, snow soft beneath their boots. "Brienne," Sansa said softly, "you have guided me through battles and plague alike. I could do none of this without you." Brienne bowed her head. "I serve your vision, my queen, and the North's hope." Sansa took her hand. "Then lead me into the Frostfangs tomorrow. We press on to the last of the wildlings and the Shadow Tower. Beyond that, perhaps the wall itself." "Bende." Brienne straightened, resolve steel sharp dot-eyed. "As you command." Under the ghostly pines, the 2 women, queen and commander, stood shoulder to shoulder, lantern light glinting off steel and snow, ready to bring justice and mercy alike to the edge of the world. "Ah. K. Ah." Brienne stood at the head of the column as dawn lightened the northern sky, mist curling around the ancient stones of the Shadow Tower. Behind her, Sansa's litter was borne aloft by steady guards, the queen already poring over fresh ravens' dispatches from Winterfell. All about them, the mixed host, stalwart knights of the Vale and Riverlands, hard-bitten Sellswards, Crannog spearmen and shield maidens, free folk bowmen in skins and furs, fell silent at the sight of the wall's ragged maw. "Here," Brienne murmured, pointing. Massive blocks of ice and stone, fused by centuries of weather, rose 50 feet into a seam of rocky crags. The haunted wind wailed through fissures, sending flurries of snow across the slogging ranks. Beyond this gate lies the true north. At Brienne's nod, the party filed through the Shadow Tower's gatehouse. Inside, they were greeted by the aged Lord Commander Locke and a dozen black-clad rangers, gaunt faces set in grim welcome. On racks hung oiled cloaks and leather boots thick with moss. Ravens cawed from their cages, now healthy and robust. "We have prepared passage," Locke said. "But beyond here, the haunted forest waits. Ice-limbed pines, hidden ravines, and worse, the crone's cowl, where the earth herself breathes poison. You must tread carefully." Brienne bowed her head. "We bear the queen's word. No harm to the watch, safe conduct for all who hold to her peace. We go to the last hearth of the wildlings, to bind them to her realm, and ensure no threat remains." Sansa dismounted with regal calm and stepped forward. "I offer pardon to any who cast down arms and swear fealty to the North. Your lands and your names shall be preserved if you come willingly. If not—" She let the threat hang unspoken, iron in the hush. A hush fell. Then, from the rear guard, the tall figure of the Shield Maiden came forward. The Free Folk's emissary, red-streaked hair bound by bone beads. Beside her, the shaman, bent by visions, carried a carved horn of black bone. They knelt before Sansa and Dai. "Our people accept your promise, Queen," the Shield Maiden said in the common tongue. "We bind to you, so long as the tide and the wild sea spare us." Sansa inclined her head. "Rise, wolf blood. You and your folk have refuge in the Gift and Winterfell alike." She gestured to Brienne. "Sir Brienne will escort you to the Gift and offer lands for your kind." With that accord sealed, Brienne marshaled her host. The gate swung open onto a narrow causeway hewn from ice and shale. The first ranks pressed forward into the haunted forest's hush. Skeletal pines bowed by frost, their boughs dripping ice lanterns that caught the weak sun. Scouts flitted ahead, rangers and Crannog spears, laying poles to mark safe paths and probing for traps. Screeches drifted from the canopy, direwolves shadowing them beyond sight, wargs riding on brooding black beasts. Sellsword captains halted at every sign of movement, but Brienne urged calm discipline. "We go as kin," she reminded them. "Let no fear breed violence." By afternoon they reached a hollow where thawed streams formed icy pools, rimmed with clay and reeds. Here, the last hearth rose, a circle of low stone dwellings built by the free folk, smoke graying its roofless chimneys. Children scurried at the edges of campfires, old men hobbled with crutches. Hunters laid down spears and braces of venison before Sansa's advance guard. The Shield Maiden, named Morga, greeted them, her freckled face alight with relief. "You have come in true," she said. "We feared the watch more than the wall." Sansa dismounted, eyes bright despite the chill. "I have no quarrel with those who would live in peace. Let me see your hearths and offer terms." Brienne oversaw the exchange. She ensured the free folk's hunters could keep their lands, that winter caches of fish and dried meat were shared to relieve hunger, and that ravens flew freely between Black and Gift. In return, many free folk swore fealty, carving the direwolf into their bone axes and donning tokens of stitched white fur. As dusk fell, the two armies, once foes, sat together around roaring bonfires. Brienne watched Riverlanders swapping ale cups with giants of the Frostfangs, Vale knights trading tales with hedge witches. In the smoke-lit interlude, Sansa took Morga aside to bestow a cloak lined with northern wolf pelt and a brooch forged in Winterfell's smithies. When the feasting died, Brienne led Sansa beneath the trees to a quiet glade where the ice ran thin, revealing a natural pool. Here, the shaman waited with the bone horn. "Drink," he urged Sansa, offering steaming water infused with bitter herbs. "So you may see the old paths." Sansa sipped and closed her eyes. Brienne saw her lips twitch as visions flickered across her veil. The wall's ancient builders, giants striding past sleds of stone, the first wildlings crossing in peace, a great raven taking flight. When she opened her eyes, they glowed with resolve. "The wall is not only stone," Sansa said softly. "It is promise, that none shall trespass to harm the realm. I will ride its length after winter, to know its strength and my oath's reach." "Da." Brienne bowed her head. "And I will ride with you, Queen." The next dawn brought gray skies and an eerie quiet. As the combined host filed back through the haunted forest toward the Shadow Tower, Brienne felt the weight of every oath she had sworn. First to Sansa, then to the realm, now to every man, woman, and child who believed in this fragile peace. They emerged onto the sweeping tundra north of the wall, black pines giving way to gravel and ice. Where the snow lay thin and whistling winds revealed the track of migrating deerwolves. When at last they reached the Shadow Tower's gate, Brienne halted. The lift bridge dropped with a thunderous groan. Sansa's litter passed beneath, the queen's cloak flaring in the wind. The Lord Commander Locke stood upon the ramparts, and behind him the wall, stark and indifferent, rose to meet the sky. Sansa dismounted, boots crunching on frozen ground. She laid a hand on the ancient stone. "You see," she said to Brienne, "that this realm's healing depends on every stone and every promise kept. The wall will stand as testament to our union of North and South, of wildling and watch, of queen and knight." Brienne drew Oathkeeper and laid a gauntleted hand beside Sansa's. "So long as I draw breath," she vowed, "I will stand sentinel here, at the edge of the world, guarding the promise we have forged." High above, a single raven cawed once, and took flight down the wall's western face. And in that echo, Brienne heard the future calling. A realm united from crown to crag, bound by oaths and the courage to keep them, led by a queen whose justice shone as bright as any Valyrian steel.